We're drifting through the origin of evil. A mother's instinct is to hate and love Nickelback, and the Kung Fu Panda and Godzilla and Kong are facing the new empire in a silver haze. I'm Van Connor.
And I'm Adam Ball, and this is Off Screen, your 7-day guide to everything movies.
Boom.
Groovy.
Hello and welcome back to Off Screen. Boy, oh boy, have we got a big show for you today. We are finally back into the realms of 8 movies in each podcast. Well, for this week anyway, because they're all backed up and they're ready for Van to talk about and let us know what he thought. So, I mean, we've got The Origin of Evil to look at, Kung Fu Panda 4, Mother's Instinct, Drift, Godzilla, X, Kong, The New Empire. The list goes on and on. Let's start then with Silver Haze, Van. So talk to me about this.
Okay, so Silver Haze is the new movie from Sasha Polak, who previously wrote and directed about 3 or 4 years ago a movie called Dirty God, and it starred an actress named Vicky Knight. And it was a really great movie, and this is their second one together. And this follows a young nurse, who's kind of the sort of kind of abandoned girl. She has a family, but she's sort of detached and abandoned, literally by her father, in fact, who had left sort of 15 years previous after she was burned in a pub fire, of which the sort of questionable origin about the fire. The actress herself is burned, so she's literally playing. This is not actually a makeup effect. This is actually her.
Oh,
and, yes, and this was the case. This was the case with the story of Dirty God as well. And the idea here is that she's sort of stalking her now absent father. She's tracked down where he lives and has sort of watched him develop this new family, seemingly with someone who may or may not have been involved in the fire that scarred her in the first place. In the meanwhile, she also enters into a relationship with a young woman that she meets, who initially seems to be the perfect girl, like the perfect influence, freeing her of her life, but soon turns out to be so much darker. And this is a clip from them very early on, when they're just sort of beginning that relationship that kicks off all of this.
What? Mum, no. Why not? No, just... Are you scared? I'm scared. You're nervous? No.
What's the going on here? The are you doing?
Go away.
What the is this?
Go
You little
in.
slags, Mum! Mum!
Go
The do you think you were doing out here?
Go in.
Nah, that's disgusting, you bunch of wrong uns.
Go
That's
in.
not the nice.
Go in.
Who the do you think you're talking to? You've got shame on this family.
So embarrassing.
What are you doing outside?
Don't touch, Mum. I already told you about that. Touch her.
You know you dirty little doing it outside.
So embarrassing. What is wrong with you?
well, looking at the trailer on mute, I would say the one thing that I can notice is actually there seems to be a lot of lovely moments in this, but also a lot of moments that might make you feel a bit uncomfortable.
Very much the case. It's a really raw. It's a really it's an unnerved drama, in a sense. There's a sort of starkness to it, but there's a sort of cold, like grazed your skin kind of quality to it. It's really captivating, actually, and engaging. The performance by Vicky Knight in the lead is terrific. I think she's fantastic in this. And as I was saying to you before we came on, I thought Esme Creed Miles, who plays Florence, the sort of initial, manic pixie dream girl come, dark princess type, is tremendous. And I couldn't figure out where I knew her from. There's a sort of familiarity to her. There's an instant engagement with her that you feel like you've seen her in other things before, clearly, because I really did think I'd seen her in something before. I thought this was a really powerful movie. This really swept me along. I thought this was really great. It looks fantastic. I say, it has that very gritty, grounded, sort of emotional, physical, semi-emotional, physical kind of scarring texture to it. Really loved it. Yeah, so that's Silver Haze, and it's out today. It's really good.
Okay, you can go and check that in cinemas near you. Let's move on then to Hate to Love, Nickelback. So is this just like a biopic of Nickelback then?
Okay, it's so much more. It is, but it's also, so it's as you say, it's the biopic, biographical documentary for Canadian rock giants Nickelback. It's also then, for about 50% of its runtime, also about the phenomenon that's made them the most hated band in the world. You know how it's trendy to hate Nickelback on like Facebook? You never see the
Really? I didn't know any of this.
You're even more of a dead rock type than me, man.
I still have in my bio, love Nickelback. Am I untrendy now then?
I think that's the implication that Facebook and social media culture did make it like a cool thing to hate Nickelback. It turned up in a lot of comedies and things. But as they explore themselves here, on top of getting like all the backstory about the band, you also get the band themselves looking at this phenomenon, saying like, here's where we think it comes from, but also we don't really care. We just enjoy being Nickelback. As we're told at one point, nobody ever picked up a guitar and set out to be in the most hated band in the world. They got into it to make great music. As Chad Kroeger himself says at one point, I'm not getting up there to be an incredible musician. I'm getting up there to play Nickelback songs to Nickelback fans. And that's awesome. Which, fair play to the man. Fair play. So you get the full story on them as well. I've got a clip for you. And do you know what? I'm not even going to tell you what song it is that they're talking about because they leave it off pretty nicely. I think you're going to be singing to yourself before you unmute the mic. Enjoy this.
You remind me. It had to be.
You can't help but sing along, right? As soon as you hear the first two lines, like there's something primal in your brain that just starts singing along with it. It's just one of those songs. Like you can say whatever you like about Nickelback, but it always has that effect. It's like the first couple of notes of Mr. Brightside by the Killers. You know how it just has that primal caveman-like effect on you. It's one of those things. And the documentary has some really fun celebration of things like that. And you know, I saw Nickelback live in the early 2000s, and I'm a big fan of the song Breathe. That's my favourite of theirs. But I think they went into that decidedly more slush rock era around like Rockstar. You know, when they released that album about 2007 that had Rockstar.
Love Rockstar.
Yeah, I think that was the point when they sort of like became sort of an institutionalized slush rock kind of a band. In no way is that not a compliment either. I say it works for them. You have to give it to them. But they're also kind of charming about looking inwards at what it is that they bring out in people of a certain subset who want to hate on them, like why they became the punchline. And it's quite fun and engaging and quite honest as well.
It's like James Blunt syndrome, really, isn't it?
Yes, it's exactly like that man has mastered Twitter. He hasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. He's brilliant. And, you know, I guess these guys are the same, you know, like you say, they're brushing it off their shoulders. We're here to make music. We don't really care what you think. I just saw a bit of the trailer, which made me chuckle. Someone wearing a T-shirt that said, Nickelback fan or liar.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's a good one,
it's
right?
Brilliant. This is definitely something I would watch and get my teeth into. You know, if you're a bit of a fan of, you know, of Nickelback or just live music and wanting to see how it all works behind the scenes, I think you kind of get a bit of a gist on this as well. But, you know, rehearsals and talking about how songs are written. Am I right? Is that kind of stuff all included?
Yeah, there's some pretty good stuff like that. Like, say, you heard the clip when they're talking about how they sort of developed How You Remind Me. You get the backstory as well, and like they went into like a lot of like they really set themselves up as like an independently funded, like crowdsourced business when they started out as a band. Like they had parents taking on loans and like the community invested in them and things like that. It's kind of a really sweet story in a sense, but also then it descends into this. At the same time, they started making like gags about us in teen comedies as if we were just like a dud thing, and that's fair play because we still sell all of these millions of tickets and albums, so I guess the joke's on us. I don't know, and you have to kind of go with the fun of it. Like, it is a good time.
Yeah, I'm quite happy for people to hate me if I'm making millions. Just putting it out there now.
It kind of works.
So if you want to watch it, Hate to Love Nickelback is in cinemas from today. All right,
I'll tell you with that one as well. If you stick around after the end credits on the Nickelback documentary, there's a lot of live concert footage. Like they've seemingly packed in like a condensed 10 to 15 minute version of a concert as a post-credit sequence. That is worth checking out.
Well, that's clever as well, because they'll be getting royalties for that, won't they?
Yeah,
so that's
totally.
Good thinking. Right, it's in cinemas from today. Hate to Love Nickelback. Right, we are going to move on to, I've got to try and get this right at least once, Ryuichi Sakamoto. No?
You did. I think you got it pretty close. Right, we'll have a listen next.
Hello and welcome back to Offscreen then. On to the next two movies, Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, we're going to look at in just a moment. First though, Ryuichi Sakamoto, Opus. Now, Van and I have just been having a conversation about why I recognise his name, and he's done scores for loads of different things. I know nothing about this, so I'll hand over to you, Van.
Yeah, Ryuichi Sakamoto Opus is... So Ryuichi Sakamoto passed last year. Passed in 2023 after a prolonged illness, during which time he decided to commemorate his work, his body of compositions he came up with for various iconic movies over the decades. And he worked with some big directors. He worked with he had the score for Snake Eyes, Brian De Palma's Snake Eyes, which is low-key my favourite Brian De Palma movie, and I will die on this hill. That is Nicolas Cage being awesome in a pretty good thriller. But in order to commemorate his body of work, he decided to stage one last concert, and this thing is actually fascinating. We've not got a clip for it because it would just be the sustained 45 second piece of music, and there's no coherent one that's not cut in the trailer, to be honest. So what we get here is his final performance as captured by his son, up-and-coming filmmaker Neo Sora, who apparently put his own first film on hold because he knew that his dad, health-wise, would not be able to get away with pulling this off for very long. So what they did was they hired out this really sort of sparse recording studio. I think it's in a broadcast building that Ryuichi Sakamoto himself declared to have just his favourite acoustics. And they set up this black and white, very intimate, hour and 40-something minute concert. It's just a man at a piano for an hour and 40 minutes or so, doing these compositions that he's dreamed up over the various years for different movies, which, like I say, include Brian De Palma's Snake Eyes. And it's really something.
I mean, I'm just watching the trailer. Obviously, I can't hear it, but it just said 20 different compositions over 5 decades in one performance. And apparently this was recorded literally just before he passed.
It was. And there is a weakness to him. There's a weakness to him physically that sort of becomes part of the intimacy of the performance. Like, there are times when he can't physically push the piano keys, where he sort of fails halfway through, and he just sort of pauses and then rolls you back in. And there's an intimacy to the way that you're sort of trusted to be part of that moment that really makes this a really powerful performance. Like I say, maybe not the most entertaining for an hour and 40 minutes, because it's, unless you're really into it, it's a little bit detaching. Obviously, there's bits of his music that I knew and I appreciated those moments more than the ones that I didn't, because you don't have that attachment to them. It's like if you imagine this was like John Williams at a piano, for instance, doing all of he's got Star Wars, he's got E.T., but there's ones that you don't remember, like from, say, something like 1941 or something like that. The way you wouldn't have that attachment to them is how you basically roll with this as well. But all throughout, you do feel that bond and that intimacy in this, like I say, very sort of poised, black and white, intimate, confined setting.
I'm presuming that he knew that his time was coming close, which is why this happened. Watching it, do you know what it reminds me of? It actually reminds me of the Freddie Mercury video to Those Were the Days of Our Lives, where he recorded it and he knew that he didn't have long left, and you could see that his energy was fading, but he wanted to give that one last performance. And that's kind of what this reminds me of, actually, watching him play the piano and put all that effort in and wanting to play all the songs and the compositions that he's written. I guess for anyone listening now who's intrigued, intrigued, maybe Google him and see if there are any particular songs or particular pieces that he's written for your favourite movies. And if so, then it sounds like it's definitely worth diving into and watching. It's in cinemas from today. Ryuichi Sakamoto, called Opus as well. Right. Shall we move on? Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire. I am dying to know what you thought of this.
Right, first of all, let's talk about that title. Because, yes, it is, in fact, Godzilla x Kong. But you know what the weird thing is? Whenever you hear it said aloud, like in the trailer voice, and the woman that came on and introduced our screening for this, they all call it Godzilla Kong, The New Empire. You're like, no, say the X. The X is fun. You gotta say the... It's like, it's not Fast 10, it's Fast X. You know, embrace the X, I say. There's something wonderfully 90s about the X. So I'm going to go with, like you, Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire. So do you remember Godzilla versus Kong a couple of years ago?
Yes. I really loved it. The CGI was absolutely incredible.
Yeah. Had that awesome fight where they were stood up on like aircraft carriers duking it out. It was really fun. And that was directed bizarrely by Adam Wingard, who previously made things like The Guest, you know, which was a really fun, sexy thriller from like 2012 with Dan Stevens. My friend John Dickinson is madly in love with Dan Stevens, I think entirely because of that film. As far as I remember, it's just one of the most amusing things about the man. Obsessed with the guy. So he's now joined this franchise as well. So this takes place a couple of years after the events of Godzilla vs. Kong, where Kong had gone and decided to live in the Hollow Earth, you know, under the earth, and Godzilla sort of like was on the surface and was going to live in the ocean, and you know, never the twain shall meet. So that's kind of the end beat of Godzilla versus Kong. And we've now got a time a couple of years later, and obviously we've seen the TV show Monarch: Legacy of Monsters. In the meanwhile, there's been that. I don't know if you've seen that on Apple TV Plus. I think we talked about it once.
No.
It's got Kurt Russell and Wyatt Russell playing the same character in different time periods, and it's all about the Monarch organization going to the Hollow Earth, and it's very fun, and Godzilla's in it quite a bit. And they sort of flesh out all the monsters. The idea is that we now live in a world in which they are S.H.I.E.L.D., effectively. And Godzilla lives on the surface and takes care of all the Titans for us. He lives in balance with humanity, where he's our Pacific Rim. Godzilla takes down all of the evil monsters that come into the world for us, and okay, we lose a city or two along the way, but that's kind of the cost of doing business with Godzilla. That's kind of the stage we've reached, and Monarch are there to basically be S.H.I.E.L.D. and sweep out the civilians. Meanwhile, Kong lives in the Hollow Earth and discovers there are other apes. He's not the last of his species, the last of his race, as we've previously been told. And there is like an evil king, effectively, in this previously undiscovered part of the Hollow Earth. And using Kong's supremacy and the axe thing from the first one that gave Kong his weird superpowers. I don't remember that. Like, there was a whole thing.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it was odd.
Yeah, it was weird, wasn't it? Like, Kong had the glowy super axe that he put in the cave, and it allowed him to go up and fight. It's all nonsense, but it's a Godzilla and King Kong movie, so of course it's nonsense. You know, it's literally in the first three, because I'm counting the X words of the title. Anyway, the evil ones seeking to use Kong's power to go up to our world and take over, basically putting Godzilla in his way and forcing him to team up with an unfortunately then injured King Kong, who can only get on with the help of Monarch. Have a listen to Godzilla x Kong.
We've discovered a signal. She can feel it. Kong, Godzilla, they can feel it too. Something is coming. Something even they're afraid of.
You feel like going for a ride?
Thought you'd never ask.
Just try not to swallow your tongue.
What?
Oh my God!
That's a harrowing noise at the end. Is there any particular reason, in your opinion, why they would put Godzilla first in the title?
I'm not quite sure on that one. I think maybe it's slightly more the recognisable name, but I don't know. I think maybe Godzilla first makes it cooler to nerds. I don't know, because Kong is the older, more classical character, isn't he?
Well, that's what I thought. Exactly, yeah. That was my point. Yeah, it's just a bit odd putting Godzilla first.
Yeah, it is weird, isn't it? But you know what? Because I just love that these movies get these cool abbreviations like GVK and GXK, and there's something very wonderfully animated about the American language series of Godzilla and Kong at this moment in time. And the way the movies are always structured is always interesting, because these crossovers always favour Kong for the obvious reason that Kong is kind of the more traditionally Western hero archetype, whereas Godzilla tends to represent more Eastern kind of cultures and pop culture and influence, and American movies always slightly skew, naturally enough, towards, their side, effectively, because they're Hollywood movies. Whereas if you do them the other way around, they would be sort of more on Godzilla's side. So obviously there's more characterization afforded Kong. For instance, there's more character to Kong, whereas Godzilla is always more a reactive character. There's some fun to be had with the humans in this, though. Like Rebecca Hall's back, Brian Tyree Henry is in there as well, and he gets to kind of steal the show, really. He was kind of fun the last time around. He gets to geek out a bit more now, and there's something a bit more traditionally, network sci-fi about his character that kind of works but still has a bit of wonder to it. And the little girl, whose name I can never remember, who plays a little Kaylee Hottle, I think her name is, who was in the previous one, who could sign language with Kong, is really compelling as well. I thought she was quite neat. So I say, good time. There's some spectacle to it. See it in IMAX if possible, like we did, and it was a really good, prominent, powerful, cinematic image at times. There's some bonkers level CGI in this, and there's a lot of complete worlds. Obviously, there are entire sequences of this film that are just 100% digital for obvious reasons. But it works a lot of the time, and there's some WWE style Pacific Rim fun to be had in the climax, obviously, with cities being destroyed. So there's a great image with Godzilla and a certain classical European, monument, we shall say, that a landmark perhaps that's I think going to stay in the canon and is going to become something I think on fan art. So do check this out. It's a rollicking good time. It's not going to be, that deep. It's a, Western language Godzilla and King Kong movie, but fair play.
Well, you can see it because it's in cinemas from today, if you wish. Still to come then, we're going to look at Drift and Mother's Instinct in just a second. We'll see what Van thought. Stay where you are.
And now it's time for a segment we like to call Off Screen Pays the Bills. Hey, Adam.
Hey, Van. So, what's going on?
Ain't nothing going on but the rent, you know how it is. And so it's a big thanks to our sponsor this week at the Art of Manliness podcast. Fancy getting in on the sharpest podcast party in town? Well, Brett McKay's Art of Manliness podcast is where it's at, with a whopping 2.5 million listeners tuning in every month. It's your golden ticket to a world of mind-blowing insights from experts worldwide, and covering everything from leveling up your life and deep thoughts to practical skills, history and beyond. It's a treasure trove of wisdom, all packed into less than an hour. Every episode will leave you buzzing with ideas to kick up your life a notch. So it's no wonder it keeps smashing the top 1% on Spotify. Honestly, we should be so lucky. So whether you catch it there or Apple Podcasts or wherever your fave podcast platform may be, get ready for some serious goodness. And don't sleep on this one. Give Brett and the Art of Manliness podcast a spin. I'm myself deep into an episode on which, and I swear I'm not making this up, an actual Scotland Yard hostage negotiator gives his tips on handling crisis management. So big love to our awesome sponsor this week, the Art of Manliness podcast, for keeping the knowledge train rolling. And now, back to the show.
Hello and welcome back to Off Screen. Right, we are going to look at Drift in a moment, but let's go back to the 60s and talk about Mother's Instinct. So, Van, this looks like a very wholesome movie.
A very wholesome movie. It is, in fact, not a wholesome movie at all. And that's the weird thing. Actually, half of it is really wholesome. Anyway, we'll get to that. Okay, so this is an adaptation. I sort of knew the story of this, and I felt all the way going into it this feels like a remake of a foreign language film that I've seen. And it turns out, I think I reviewed the original, I think it was Belgian French language version in about 2018. I think that's what it was. Wow. So it seemed a bit familiar because I thought, this seems very specific. I feel like I remember this from somewhere. You know, because sometimes you don't remember them all the way. You're like, oh, okay, I remember now. Another Round had that effect on me recently. I was reading about Another Round, like, oh, okay, I remember that now. Because that was an awesome movie too. So this is the English language remake. It stars Anne Hathaway and Jessica Chastain. And they are two, as you say, 1960s, early 1960s, like maybe 61, 62 kind of time. Over the course of 1 year, we follow the lives of these two next-door neighbours / best friends / fellow young wives and mums. Basically, they're sort of mum friends, but they're best friends. There's a sort of sisterly bond between the two. They both, have the husband and the young son. The sons are about the same age. And one day, Jessica Chastain is gardening. She sees Anne Hathaway's son climbing onto his bedroom balcony, like in a perilous position. She races to try and catch him, but he falls to his death. And then Anne Hathaway sort of blames Jessica Chastain for this. There's this simmering guilt as this grieving mum obviously has to put the blame somewhere. But at the same time, you've got Jessica Chastain who lives with this sense of guilt as to, could I have done more? Should I blame myself? All of which comes to a head at different stages over the course of this year as we bout into these sort of games of one-upmanship or one-womanship, as it were, as they start to take shots at each other in different forms. And on the one hand, you have Jessica Chastain, who's going at it from the emotional angle. On the other side, you have Anne Hathaway, who's going full tilt nuts in this, like Joan Crawford nuts.
It wasn't easy bringing you into this world. Now you've left it too soon.
Go this way.
You need to separate the grief from the guilt.
What guilt, Alice? Something's broken inside of me, and I need you.
I saw the look in her eyes. She thinks that I should have saved her son.
Is that coming from her or you?
You think I'm imagining things?
We're not going down this path again.
You're right. God knows I can get carried away sometimes.
I am an Anne Hathaway fan. I pretty much like every movie that she's in. I'm a Hatha fan, exactly that. The one question I would ask, though, is she the usual Anne Hathaway in this? Because I always find quite a lot of the time she's that... Oh, really? Okay, good. Because she's normally that sort of cutesy, naive young lady, whereas she's not that in this.
No, she's like full Joan Crawford levels. Just kind of warped in this. She's good fun. Do you know the weird thing is, though, that clip that we played, which wasn't the clip I thought it was actually the trailer clip, is actually more interesting because that noticeably plays up the thriller half of this. The problem is it's only half of it, and the other half is Jessica Chastain's emotional drama. And they both commit to the bit so hard that the film kind of feels torn at times as to which one it should really have run with instead, rather than feeling like this real split focus kind of a movie. They're both very good movies, but they don't necessarily quite work together. It's good fun, though, when it leans into either, but it's just a bit messy hopping between them. I personally really enjoyed the Anne Hathaway side of this, which I can't tell you too much because it kind of takes the fun. It's not that it's unpredictable, it's quite predictable, but I don't want to give you too much in advance on it. And it is, let's just say, if, like me, you're a fan of certain movies of the early 90s, that they just don't really make as well anymore, although there was a pretty decent one with Hilary Swank a couple of years ago, this is one for you. Otherwise, a very enjoyable, Jessica Chastain, emotional, mother drama.
Well, you don't even have to leave the house if you want to go and see this, because this is on Prime Video already. So go and check out Mother's Instinct. Free to watch if you already subscribe. Okay, let's move on to Drift. One thing I've noticed about Drift is your name has to begin with an A if you want to be involved in this movie, because looking at the cast, pretty much everybody begins with A.
Yeah, that's Greece for you, baby. Because like most of the listed cast in this, Greek actors, so there's a big prominence of A names. Do you know, now I think about it, every Greek friend I've ever had has had an A name. That is actually true. How would I never piece that together? That is just one of them things, I guess, just one of those things. So
that explains it then.
Even the director's an A, it's directed by Anthony Chen. So yeah, boom, baby, you're getting it. So I will point out that all of this revelry is completely at odds with the actual film itself, Drift, which is this very humanistic drama come character piece, crossed with a sort of story about trauma that stars Cynthia Erivo as a young woman who's sort of adrift, mentally lost, like emotionally barren, just wandering through the beaches of Greece, just trying to scrap together just a way to make it through the day, a place to sleep at night, things like that. And she enters into this friendship with an American who's moved to Greece, become a sort of tour guide, and has then broken up with the partner that she moved there for, played by Alia Shawkat. And they sort of become friends. And as their friendship develops, Cynthia Erivo starts to relive the trauma that has led her to this sort of lonely existence, all of the horror that kind of drove her there. So have a listen.
This site dates back to the 5th century BC. We take a few minutes, look around, and then we'll head up. Oh, careful.
Barbarians.
Where are their parents?
They fled.
I'm Callie.
Jacqueline.
Don't look at my face.
You're not Greek.
No, American.
When it's all over, you might.
Where are you from?
Liberia.
Along the way, I feel.
I've got to say one thing that was hilarious at that point is that clip you played was exactly in sync with the trailer that I was watching on mute while that audio was going out, which is bizarre because that never, ever, ever happens. What I can say is, from what I've seen, like the cinematography on this is beautiful.
I know, right? It's a gorgeous looking film. It really is. Here's the thing about this. It's great. It is really great. This is not a popcorn, movie or anything like that. We're talking about like this is a really, captivating, like harrowing at times drama. Yeah. And Cynthia Erivo in particular, she just owns this. Like she plays this perfectly. Like. Do you know what it is? There's something to the performance where you kind of feel like there's a bit of the Clark Kent Superman about it. It's like which one's the real persona, that kind of thing. So you kind of you can look at her character from from different views. I sort of came at her from this is someone who quite clearly is on the verge of exploding and giving into this absolute emotional turmoil. This absolute emotional explosion at any point that could absolutely destroy her. And at the same time, there is this very innocent friendship, this very naturalistic, like oxygen level friendship that starts to sort of slowly creep her back. And Cynthia Erivo is absolutely terrific in it. She always kind of runs at her own speed anyway. Like even in crap movies, Cynthia Erivo is great. Like you've got to give her that. Like she is next level great. To be fair, some of the movies aren't. Like I'm looking at you, Chaos Walking, but you know what? She was in Widows. I bloody love Widows. I haven't seen that in ages. I'm going to go back and revisit Widows, but she's great here. I like Alia Shawkat as well, but she's not quite on the same level as Erivo because Cynthia Erivo is great. And Anthony Chen, whose work I wasn't familiar with, has delivered, as you say, just a stunning looking movie as well. I really went along with this, and when they get to the horrors and the nightmares and things like that. They are hard. They don't flinch. They go hard, and it might be a little bit too hard for how just kind of tranquil the rest of the film is in dealing with this journey of hers. But I found them quite effective personally.
Well, if you want to check it out, you can go and see it in cinemas from today. Just look for Drift. Right, okay, let's move on. We're going to look at The Origin of Evil and Kung Fu Panda 4 before we finish, so stay right where you are. We'll be back. So, hello and welcome back to Offscreen for one last ride. 2 movies left. That is Kung Fu Panda 4. Can you believe there's 4?
I know.
And first, though, I know, right? We're going to look at The Origin of Evil, which, again, I don't know a huge amount about this, actually. So, yeah, where do you want to start?
I mean, I didn't know a huge amount about this either, and oh my God, I regret that I didn't know more about this. I should have been more excited. I'll be really honest. I watched this on a screening link this morning. Okay, sorry, obviously this morning of the day of recording. This was my final movie to watch for this week. I put it on. It was first thing in the morning. I sort of like had my morning coffee and put this on, and I thought this is it. This looks like a family drama. Okay, cool. Oh man. Oh, I didn't set I was not ready. Okay, so this features, I'm trying to remember the name of the actress. It is Laurie Calamy. It's Laurie, but there's no I in the Laurie. French actress Laurie Calamy. Right. She is a young woman who's a kind of a con artist, an identity thief. Okay, she has a girlfriend who's in prison who tells her that she is, in fact, the illegitimate daughter of this sort of rich business magnate. Okay, so our protagonist, Laurie Calamy, the con artist, assumes the identity of her incarcerated girlfriend, whilst, on the outside, to then track down said, rich businessman, tell her that she is, in fact, his estranged daughter, worm her way into his family, and then start effectively single white femaling them, or sort of salt burning them, for lack of a better term. We haven't got a clip for this because it's entirely French language. But, yeah, I know. But, this was so much fun. Like I say, this was like classy person salt burn, directed by Sebastian Meunier, whose work I'm not overly familiar with, but I am certainly going to get more familiar with based on this, because I had a blast with this. This was great fun. Like, they weren't messing around when they set this up. Like, they really go in, like, full salt burn, full speed ahead, and then just decide, and now something completely different, and they really don't pull the punches on it. It works. I maybe didn't quite like the final frame. I would have liked the other way, but I had a blast with it. Great performance by Laurie Calamy, who kind of makes you like, okay, yeah, I can see why people are falling for this sort of talented Mr. Ripley-like character. And it works. If you're a fan of like talented Mr. Ripley as well, Saltburn, which I know those two are comparative anyway, definitely check this out, because we've got the new Ripley series on Netflix. I think it's like next week or the week after, with Andrew Scott.
Is this good enough for me to ignore the subtitles, though, Van? There's the ultimate question.
I think it's fun and twisted enough to warrant it. You really should. Although not before you watch The Raid, Mr. Ball. No,
here we
not
go
ever.
again.
You are watching the bloody Raid.
Okay, that is first on my list. I hands up, we'll watch The Raid. Okay, well, The Origin of Evil, if you do want to check it out, cinemas from today. Finally, then, our last movie. It's been a big one this week, hasn't it? We're going to look at Kung Fu Panda 4. So, Jack Black. Love Jack Black. He's in it, of course.
Yes, Jack Black is back for the 4th time now as Po, the sort of initially sort of like doughy, unfit panda who discovered that because he really wanted to, he hero worshipped like karate sort of masters, despite working in his adoptive father, a goose. This is animated, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know. Hence, yeah, his adoptive father is a goose who runs a restaurant, and Po was sort of forced to work for him despite wanting to achieve his dream. Anyway, he became the Dragon Warrior, the mystical like Luke Skywalker of all kung fu masters, and went on adventures 3 times, and this is now the 4th one, in which he has now graduated to a point at which he's mastered the kung fu art so well, he has to choose his successor and move on to becoming the teacher of wisdom instead. And he struggles with this need to let the good times end and in his mind and move on to, I'm making this children's movie sound so much more complex than it needs to be. So he's struggling with how to move on, and at the same time he finds himself drawn along on an adventure with a sort of con artist sort of fox character voiced by Awkwafina, and that puts them in the crosshairs of a seemingly long dormant villain known as the Chameleon, voiced by Viola Davis, who has designs on harvesting the kung fu skills of the underworld.
Oogway chose you as his successor, and now you must choose yours.
Master Shifu, I finally found something I'm good at, and now you want to just take it away from me?
No one is taking anything away, Poe. Who you are will always be a part of what you become.
Yeah, but where's the skadoosh? You know what I mean? The shashaburi! I don't want to seem ungrateful, but I don't know anything about passing on wisdom or inspiring hope. All I know are two things: kicking butt and taking names. And if I'm being completely honest, I'm not even that good at the name-taking. Like, who is that fire-breathing crocodile? I want to say Steve?
So, 2 questions. Does this have a lot of those jokes that go over the kids' heads but will make adults chuckle? And secondly, I would love to know if you could go and see this if you've not seen any of the others and you'd still understand it.
Right, I'm going to be really honest with you. I did not do the homework on this. I arranged that I had the entire Kung Fu Panda series to watch ahead of this movie, and then I just got busy and I didn't get around to it, okay? But I did see this with a pair of 5-year-olds, and they do love the series, and they thought this was like the greatest. I believe one of them gave it a 12 out of 10. And the other one, I think, gave 2 thumbs up and said it was the best. So it worked for them. I had a good time. I found it about as fun as I found the other Kung Fu Panda movies. And the caveat of that, though, is that in each case, you watch them, you enjoy them, and about 20 minutes later, you've kind of forgotten them. They're fun while they're on, but they don't stick with you. They're not like Pixar level emotional or anything like that. But they are fun while they're on. And, you've got Bryan Cranston and James Hong as the 2 dads. They're great together. They get a lot of scenes together. Awkwafina is Awkwafina, to be fair. My absolute favourite part of this, though, was Ian McShane being back as the villain, because he's a genuinely great voice for animation. Ian McShane, big fan.
Yeah,
and Jack Black's just doing Jack Black shtick, but he's good at that. He's kind of perfect for this stuff.
So there you go. Fun, but not groundbreaking is probably the bottom line on that one.
It's
then.
one to take the kids to. You'd watch this with Albert and be like, yeah, this is fine. I don't mind spending an hour and a half with this. This is perfectly innocuous fun. I'm not going to remember it after lunch, though.
All right, well, Kung Fu Panda 4, if you would like to take the kids to go and see it, it's in cinemas from today. Right, let's have a quick look at next week then, because it looks like we've got another busy one coming up. We're going to talk about Seize Them. I have no idea what that's about.
Yeah, Seize Them is a sort of about Dark Ages Britain, right? And the idea is the Queen sort of becomes a fugitive in this sort of, I think it's like a sort of action-adventure type. But
that didn't date well.
I know, right? So we've also got The Trouble with Jessica, which is another British movie. We've got YOLO, which I think is a Sony import. Evil Does Not Exist, and the 2 that I'm really looking forward to talking to you about next week, because they've got this weird thing. I don't know if you've noticed this. We had Late Night with the Devil last week, right? Then we had Immaculate. Yeah. Was Immaculate last week as well, or was it the week before? But we've had
before.
Yeah, Late Night with the Devil, Immaculate, and The First Omen, which is the prequel to The Omen, okay? The other 1970s classic horror movie. So we've had 3 movies in a row. Satanism is back, baby, in cinema. Yes, clearly. I don't think we can deny that at this stage. We're back in the 70s.
They're doing it all at the wrong time of year, though. They needed to save this for October.
I know. This was it, right? Let's say the strikes didn't happen. I presume that the strikes maybe got some of these delayed. But The First Omen, I'm really looking forward to. I'm a big fan of the Omen series, but certainly the first one. I even have time for the trashness of the sequels. But also next week is the directorial debut of its also screenwriter and star Dev Patel. It's Monkey Man. It's produced by Jordan Peele, and it's this great new action movie that's out next week.
Wow, okay. I'm always up for a new action movie, so loads to look forward to. That is, of course, all we have time for this week on Off Screen. We will be back next week. Until then, I've been Adam Ball.
I've been Ben Connor, and we shall return.